Good afternoon and welcome to this virtual meeting of the Development Panel of Allerdale Borough Council. My name is Lee Jardine and I'm the Democratic Services Officer, and for the purposes of this meeting I am also the host. I will have no control over the meeting and the meeting will be live streamed on YouTube with a recording to be made available afterwards. Shortly I'll hand you over to the chair, but first, introductions. Can I ask the members to introduce themselves? Once you introduce yourselves, can you please just repeat your name and good afternoon. So we'll start with Councillor Coburn.
Good afternoon, Councillor Nikki Coburn.
Councillor Daniels.
Good afternoon, Councillor Alan Daniels.
Councillor Fairbrother.
Good afternoon, Councillor Janet Fairbrother.
Councillor Heaslip.
Afternoon, Councillor Michael Heaslip.
Councillor Horsley.
Good afternoon, Councillor Daniel Horsley.
Councillor Semple.
Good afternoon, Councillor Andrew Semple.
Councillor Smith.
Good afternoon, Councillor Alan Smith.
Councillor Tyson.
Good afternoon, Councillor Alan Tyson.
And Councillor Wilkinson.
Good afternoon, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Now we'll go over to the officers. Simon Sharp.
Good afternoon, my name is Simon Sharp. I'm the Planning and Building Control Manager.
Sharon Sewell.
Good afternoon, Sharon Sewell, Head of Governance and Monitoring Officer.
Thank you all for your introductions. Can I just remind members to stay on mute for the meeting unless they are going to speak? To speak, please can members use the raised hand icon and only speak when requested by the chair. Once you've finished speaking, please can you lower your hand. I will now formally hand you over to the chair to start the meeting. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. As previously stated, my name is Nikki Coburn and I am Chair of the Development Panel for Allerdale Borough Council. You've been introduced to the members and officers in attendance today. The planning application under consideration today will be decided by the members of the panel who are councillors, and we are supported by the officers in attendance. Moving on to the agenda. The minutes, agenda item 1, the minutes to sign as a correct record, the minutes of the meetings held on the 30th of June 2020, 28th of July 2020, and the 11th of August 2020. There's just one amendment that on page 7, my apologies were given and the Deputy Chair, Councillor Granger, chaired the meeting, and that's on the 28th of July 2020. I will assume that all members are in agreement with the minutes unless they use the raised hand function now to indicate that they wish to speak. So could members please indicate now? I can't see any raised hands. Can you, Lee?
No, Chair.
Right. Thank you. The minutes are approved. Agenda item 2, apologies for absence. Do we have any apologies, please?
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies today from Councillor Lynch, who's been replaced by Councillor Heaslip, Councillor Armstrong, who's been replaced by Councillor Wilkinson, and apologies from Councillor Mumby and Councillor Granger. Thank you.
Thank you. Declarations of interest. Please use the raised hand function to indicate if you wish to make a declaration. If it becomes apparent during consideration of any application that you have an interest, please declare it at that point. I can't see any. Can you, Lee? No. Questions. We do have questions. So I'll hand you over to Lee now for agenda item 4.
Thank you, Chair. We do have questions today, and they are from residents, and they're going to be read out on behalf of, read on residents' behalf from Ian Massey. I'm just waiting for Mr. Massey to join the meeting now, and I believe he's here. Mr. Massey, just to clarify certain things for you, as I say, in a moment you can ask your questions. The question that's yours, you can ask a supplementary. For the rest, it's just questions and you receive a response from the officers. Okay, so I'll hand you over to our officer now. Just explain the situation regarding the answering of your questions. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Lee. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yeah, I just need to hand you over to our officer first, just to explain, just to clarify an issue for you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Mr. Massey. So just for clarification, Mr. Massey, if you recall, Councillor Granger was in the chair at that meeting, and Councillor Granger has given his apologies for today's meeting, but asked me to reply on his behalf. So when you've asked the questions, I will be replying on Councillor Granger's behalf as the chair of the meeting on that meeting in July. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you may begin, Mr. Massey.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you, everybody, for giving me this opportunity to speak. I know we've had a little bit of correspondence with a few of you recently. If I may, just a little bit about me, so you know who I am. I've lived in Workington since 1978, and I've lived in Stainburn since 1988. I'm a retired civil engineer, and part of my role at Sellafield was to submit for 25 years worth of all the planning and building regulations for the whole of the Sellafield site. So I have had a little bit of experience at doing some things for an industrial site. My other major experience that I've had as well is that unfortunately my son had a very serious road accident, and I had spent many months with him in hospital while he made a good recovery. But I have seen a considerable number of families whose member of their family has never made it through. So I am quite conscious of road traffic accidents and the consequences they can have on the whole of the families, and hence so these are some of the driving forces behind my questions. So what I'd like to do, if I may, because I've been to quite a few of the other local residents around, and I've named a few of the people, as you can see. So there's many more than that I've spoken to, but those are the people who are happy to be named. The reason that everybody wants to ask these questions is to promote action from yourselves to improve the environment and safety for the community. So they're not saying this is for their own personal gain, they just consider this is important for everybody in the community. So the context of the questions are, you will be well aware about the Allerdale Local Plan Part 2 allocation for 130 dwellings. And by the way, I'm impressed with your local plan. So I think Allerdale Borough Council should be congratulated on all the work that they've done. Not everybody in the country manages this, so I think you should give yourself a bit of a pat on the back for that. So the proposed deferment that I put in, requested for at the planning meeting, was unfortunately not achieved. Now the reason for that was on two grounds. One was on environmental grounds and the other one was on highway safety grounds. So the questions that we'd like to ask are split into those two categories: environment and in terms of road and highway safety. So the question number one is that the retention of the stone barn, which is built in 1841 on Stainburn Road at Stainburn Farm. Now, as part of your local plan, reference WOR 0504, the barn is part of the development site, whereas the adjacent houses are not. Now, we know that there are bats, swallows, and other habitats within that area. And so what we're really asking you is, how, as part of the next planning application or part of your local plan, are you going to ensure retention of this wildlife area so that it doesn't get demolished as part of the next phase? So that was the first question. The second question is that at the bottom part of the next phase of this development site, is a flood zone stroke wildlife zone, and the locals would like to know, how are you going to ensure that that area is actually going to be retained as a flood zone and wildlife zone? So those are the two environmental questions that were giving people most concern, that we didn't really get resolved last time. Now I know what Simon's going to say to me is that was not part of the application for the 81 dwellings, and this will be subject to the next application. Should it go ahead within the 130, we understand that, but we'd like some assurance that there's going to be some measures in place to retain these, so we're not arguing about it at the time. This is preset. On to highway safety. I'll just give you a little piece of information before I ask the questions. And the first one is, I have met with Cumbria County Council highway engineers on site last week. This was thanks to Councillor David Southward, who gave me a contact, and I've had a meeting with them on site. They are similarly concerned about the extent of the proposed works by the developer for the application for 81 houses, because they believe this is inadequate. So I'll give you that as a piece of background information. And so the questions that we're going to be asked is, this is question 3. Local residents have witnessed several road accidents and involved witnesses of other potentially dangerous incidents adjacent to the proposed access for the 81 dwellings. We've had one car end upside down on some facing the wrong way in somebody's front garden because of the speed of approach. We've got evidence at the moment of continued impact of walls, and I think I may have emailed to some of you another recent incident where somebody lost control and spun their car and ended up backwards in somebody's drive. This is a dangerous road for vehicles traveling over 30 miles an hour, and this is due to the configuration of the road. It has what's called a negative camber, which then actually, if you go too fast, it turns the car. It's a right-hand bend, it leans to the left, and it flips the cars over and they lose control. So we know that this is a dangerous place. If you have visited site and looked at the drawings that have been submitted with the planning application for the 81 properties, it says on the drawings a very limited amount of work is proposed. Now, we know that this is going to give problems, and Cumbria County Council highways engineers have also confirmed that the amount of works there is inadequate on safety grounds. So we'd like you to give us, the local residents, how and when a Cumbria County Council and Allerdale going to ensure that the works is going to be funded by somebody, preferably the developer, to ensure that the safety on that piece of road for Stainburn people and the residents of the 81 dwellings, which has been confirmed by Cumbria County Council, actually takes place. There is concern that the developer might only put in what he's put on his drawing, not as per what Cumbria County Council highways want. I know a section 268 needs to go in, but we want some assurance that this is going to be backed up by yourselves. Question number 4, the road junction at Moor Road and the old A66 at the Briery pub. Another road traffic accident waiting to happening. Oh, are you still with me? Have I lost Lee? Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
We can still hear you, Mr. Massey.
Yeah, we can still hear you, Mr. Massey.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry.
I disappeared. You all disappeared. I was a bit worried there.
No problem.
I'm sure you've had enough of me talking anyway, but I'll finish this last question. So if you go to site.
Mr. Massey, do you think you could just stick to the questions, please?
Yep, okay. So this is the question. Well, I was trying to be helpful. I'm sorry, I was trying to be helpful. If you visit the site, you will observe this junction is a dangerous junction. So how and when are Allerdale Borough Council and Cumbria County Council Highways going to ensure the safety improvements occur at that junction as well? Is that all right?
Thank you, Mr. Massey. So responding on Councillor Granger's behalf, as he was the chair of that meeting. Your first question, to paraphrase, is about the 1841 stone barn.
Yep.
And the habitat that it offers. So the answer is as follows. So the allocation for the 130 dwellings in the Allerdale Local Plan Part 2 and the accompanying policy SA8 do not envisage the retention of the farm buildings. The development considerations in policy SA8 advise that stone from the demolished farm buildings should be incorporated into the new development frontage on the site of the former farmstead. This consideration seeks to ensure that the historic character and appearance of this part of the settlement is preserved in some way. If an application was submitted, habitat surveys would need to be undertaken prior to any demolition of the buildings, and planning policy S35 of the local plan part 1 reflects the national hierarchy with regards to ecology, i.e. firstly to avoid ecological harm, then to mitigate if avoiding is not possible, and then finally compensation as a last resort. This would be a relevant consideration when a planning application is submitted for the remaining part of the allocation. And the provisions of the Wildlife and Countryside Act and the protection they give to species would also apply. The buildings are not listed, and nor are they within a conservation area, so they could be demolished without a planning application or listed building consent being required. However, as the council, we do fully acknowledge that the buildings are of some architectural and historic merit. We also acknowledge fully that they provide habitat for various species. Therefore, it is our opinion that their retention would be the most desirable solution, and we can empathise with the inquirer's stance. In this context, my officers of the council will encourage their retention if approached at a pre-application stage by a developer or the owner. However, for the reasons outlined above, this can by no means guaranteed. So that's the answer, Mr. Massey, to the first question. Moving on to the second question, which was about the wildlife flood zone on the southern part of the site adjacent to Scales Beck, and how we're going to ensure the retention of that zone. So the answer on behalf of Councillor Granger is as follows. As detailed by officers during the consideration of the application for the 81 dwellings, the development of the allocation must be homogeneous, i.e. the development of the 81 dwellings and up to the remaining 49 dwellings must be seen seamlessly as the same development. The wildlife and flood zone is an integral and key part of this overall plan. Any future proposals would need to accord with policy S35 of the Allerdale Local Plan Part 1 and seek to meet the development considerations of policy SA8 of Part 2. Of note in the latter are the following. The watercourse adjacent to the southern boundary of the site also connects with the designated River Derwent and Bassenthwaite Lake Special Area of Conservation. A buffer zone should be maintained around the watercourse. Secondly, an extended phase 1 habitat survey of the site should be undertaken during the optimal survey period from April to September. And this will be required to enable a more detailed assessment of ecological constraints and/or opportunities. This will form the basis of more detailed survey work which may be needed. Thirdly, the stream corridor should be protected using a wide buffer zone of additional native planting and retention of the marshy grassland. A small reed bed is recommended. The large size of the site presents an opportunity to provide new habitats, green infrastructure, and sustainable urban drainage systems, and deliver a net gain in biodiversity. We would expect as the council to see accordance with these considerations in any development scheme for the remaining land within the allocation. Indeed, biodiversity and flood risk are likely to be two of the main considerations if and when an application is submitted. We would hope and encourage an applicant to engage with the council and local community representatives before and during the formulation of their proposals. The provision of biodiversity net gain and ensuring no increase in the flood risk to surrounding land and homes are both essential. Your third question, Mr. Massey, was relating to the safe access and egress for pedestrians and vehicles to the development of the 81 dwellings, and why there were very limited highway works and traffic calming measures agreed. So the first point to make is I'm aware from your question today that you met representatives of Cumbria County Council Highways, that's how I understand it. In this detailed response from on behalf of Councillor Granger, one thing I would iterate there is that we did receive correspondence from the County Council as in their capacity as the County Highways Authority, agreeing to those reduced off-site measures. So the answer is the matter was discussed and considered at length following the submission of the planning application. As you will be aware, there was a larger suite of measures proposed and agreed with the County Highways Authority during the early processing of the application, but these were reduced in scale following negotiations. Allerdale officers were led by comments from the County Highways Authority, and the officers' advice to members was based on them. The county are the statutory consultee for the non-trunk road and highway network, and it would have been unreasonable in this instance to not follow their advice. So that is the response to your third question, Mr. Massey. Your fourth question was how and when are Allerdale and the Cumbria County Council Highways going to ensure the safe access and egress for vehicles at the Moor Road Old A66 junction, and when are the arrangements are at present hazardous and 81 dwellings will only increase the vehicular movements at this junction. So the response on behalf of Councillor Granger is as follows. Again, Allerdale officers and members turned to the expert advice of the statutory consultees, the County Highways Authority. Their advice acknowledged that there would be an increase in vehicle and trip rates at the Moor Road Old A66 junction, but these will not be to the extent that there will be a material decrease in highway safety that warranted the refusal of the application. Allerdale officers and members, in the context of this advice, agreed. Similarly, improvements to this junction were not considered reasonably necessary as a result of this development. The one general comment also Councillor Granger would make in response to all those questions, Mr. Massey, is that we will, as a council, through officers, encourage any future applicant developer to engage with the local community at an early stage, preferably at pre-application stage, to ensure that those comments of the community are taken into account when shaping a development. We can't guarantee that, but we do encourage that on every occasion, and we particularly notice the comments in this regard that you have made today in the queries with regard to wildlife, the farm buildings, and to highway safety. So that concludes the answers on behalf of Councillor Granger. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Massey, and thank you very much for your participation today. Would you like emailed a copy of the responses?
That would be very helpful. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, moving on now to agenda item 5. We'll look at the application, which is FUL/2020-0043 Barncroft, 16 High Seaton. I'll hand you over to Simon once again. Thank you.
Before he does that, Chair, I'm just going to make sure the speaker for this item is joining us. Just give me a moment, please. Thank you.
Simon, is it all right with you to email Mr. Massey the responses?
Yes, certainly, Chair.
Sorry about this, Chair. Just waiting for the speaker to join. Okay, the speaker's joined the meeting, Chair. So, Simon, you can continue. Just a reminder for the speaker, if you can put yourself on mute, please. Thanks very much. Simon, you can proceed.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Chair. So this first application is for 3 dwellings within land in the curtilage of 16 High Seaton in the village of Seaton. What I will do immediately is go to share my screen, members, and take you through some slides, and that's the best way of explaining the context to this application. Can all members see the screen now, please? Are members seeing the location plan?
Yes.
Yep. Thank you, Chair. So the application site is within the heart of the built envelope of Seaton. So the surrounding uses of land are residential. As you can see from this location plan, there is residential to the on the opposite side of the road, to the north, to the east and west, and to the south. As outlined in the officer's report, there is a mix of dwelling types in the locality at varying densities. The development along the High Seaton frontage tends to be the lower density development, and then more suburban character in the later estates to the rear, including, for example, Fernley Drive and Fernley Close. So this is full application, so members are considering the principle of development today, as well as the details, for example, of the layout, the scale, appearance, landscaping, and access. So if members can see the cursor, this is the existing property, 16 High Seaton. Now, as you'll see from the photographs, this property was originally a barn. It's had extensive alterations to it, and those alterations and extensions to it are ongoing. So they include this rear extension. This was a previous single-story extension. There is also a garage, which has actually not been built as shown here. It's more towards the corner of the site here, a detached garage belonging to that property. You can see existing dwellings at number 17 High Seaton, for example, and this is 1 and 3 Fernley Drive, where my cursors are here. You'll see those in the photographs. The first of the 3 dwellings would sit between the existing dwelling, 16 High Seaton, also known as Barncroft, and number 17. It's a 2-storey dwelling. And then there are 2 additional dwellings proposed, dormer bungalows, type B and type C here. There's a singular shared private vehicular access from Fernley Drive here. There is a protected tree, which is this tree here, which, as members can see, is not affected by the proposal. So vehicle and pedestrian access out onto Fernley Drive, up to the junction with High Seaton. This is High Seaton here, and then this direction towards the village centre and Workington, and then turning right to go towards Broughton Moor. So I've just zoomed in on the block plan. These are annotations which have been added by officers, so not by the applicant. So this gives you an idea that the setback of the dwellings from the High Seaton frontage is approximately 25 metres. So that's the setback. This is High Seaton, the main thoroughfare through Seaton. And then there is an offset of about 4 metres from number 17, the nearest dwelling to the type A dwelling, not in the applicant's control. On the other side being 16, which is Barncroft, the applicant's existing dwelling. So as you can see, the majority of type A's garden will be between it and the main thoroughfare. As you'll see, there's a high boundary here, so this would in effect become a private garden. And you can see that the vehicle and pedestrian access is here, whereas the other dwellings are orientated the other way around, facing High Seaton. This shows the relationship of the type C dormer bungalow to the dwellings at Fernley Drive, the nearest 1 and 3. This is the boundary line. Members can see the cursor. So this is the boundary line. The separation distance between the dwelling, the proposed dwelling, and the rear elevation of number 1 is 9.5 metres. 9.5 metres. Albeit, as you will see from the plans, the type C faces this way and to the rear into its garden here. So it's a side gable elevation of this dormer bungalow that's nearest 1 and 3 Fernley Drive, the 12.5 metre separation there. This is the type A property plotted with number 17, that's the neighbouring property here, and number 16 Barncroft, the dwelling that's being added to and extensively altered here. You can see the orientation from this elevation that it's actually facing towards the proposed vehicular access rather than High Seaton. This is the High Seaton elevation, the elevation facing across that 25 metres of garden area. So this is the height from the ground level to the ridge, 7.3 metres. And then the height from ground level to the eaves is 5 metres. So that roof height is in effect the extra 2.3 metres, the difference between the 5 and the 7.3. So you can see it's a detached 2-storey dwelling, some traditional features like the banding around paired windows that you see a lot in West Cumbria, some more modern features such as the full height glazing, but a gabled roof and a chimney. This is the first of the dormer bungalows, the middle one, if you remember from the site plan. I can go back to that in a second. I'll just, so it's this dwelling. and you can see it's clearly a dormer bungalow with dormers. And this is the elevation facing towards the highway, and this is the elevation facing towards the nearest residential garden to the rear. This is dormer bungalow type C. So if you remember, this is this one with its gable, side gable, nearest 1 and 3 Fernley Drive. So that's why there's the gable elevations facing to the side. It's the front elevation, and you can see from the rear elevation the proposed overall height. I'm trying to get my cursor back. The proposed overall height is 5.3 meters to the ridge. So if you can remember that it was 7.3 for the 2-story house, so we're dropping 2 meters in comparison to the 2-story house, and 2.5 meters from ground to eaves level. So this photo, as you can see from the denuded trees, was taken last winter. There are photos of the site now as well. So what you can see is the neighbouring property, number 17 here. So the new dwelling type A sits in this gap. The main thoroughfare, High Seaton, is to the left of this picture. So this is that 25-metre separation distance that we saw on the site plan. And Barncroft, the existing dwelling currently being altered and extended, is just off the camera to the right-hand side. So you can see, members can see the low density, mature landscaping, etc., that characterises those frontage dwellings. This is it today. So you can still see the mature landscaping. There's number 17, and there's the in transition number 16 Barncroft. So you can see it with the scaffolding. It's essentially an extended shell at the moment. And just here is that garage, that detached garage in the front garden that I talked about on the site plan. Back to the winter photographs. Here's Barncroft before it was gutted and altered. Here's number 17 on that high ground. If you can remember from the sites, the section, the street scene section that we saw, it sits on high ground. There's the frontage hedge for High Seaton. So the dwelling A would sit in this gap. So now we are in the area looking at the siting for dwelling C. Dwellings on the right-hand side of Fernley Drive, and these are the Fernley Close houses on the left-hand side of the image. So this image starts to show you the relationship, the separation distances with these adjoining dwellings on Fernley Drive, particularly relevant for the dwelling C. This is looking towards those dwellings that are now on the right-hand side of Fernley Drive. We're looking down the wedge of the site, which will essentially become dwelling C's rear garden. And these are the 2-story dwellings on Fernley Close. So these, I can hop back if members wish to the site plans just to get your context. So if we just members memorize those, we'll just hop back. So that's these 2 dwellings here. The camera is here looking down to these dwellings. So moving on to the next slide. Now we're on the rear boundary of 3 Fernley Drive, looking, you can see reference point number 17 High Seaton here. So we're looking into the land which will be occupied by dwelling C and dwelling B. So you can see the outlook, you can see, and if you remember from the site plan, that you've got a 9.5 metre distance from number 1, just a bit more from number 3, but you can see that I've got a relatively small rear garden, if you can remember from the photographs. So that is why officers negotiated a decrease in the scale of dwellings B and C. We considered that absolutely necessary because of the outlook from 1 and 3 Fernley Drive and the massing that could affect their amenity. Indeed, there's also overshadowing. And that shows that relationship. So now we're looking at those dwellings 1 and 3 here, and you can see this is the wedge of land which will be dwelling C's garden. Dwelling C would just be out of shot to the right-hand side. So you can see the depth of gardens here. Now we're looking back towards the under transformation Barncroft. This is now on Fernley Drive, looking back to the junction of High Seaton here. Notice that there are parked vehicles on Fernley Drive. It's unrestricted parking. The access would come in here to the site. There is, though, unrestricted parking closer to the junction and also up the slope deeper into Fernley Drive. There are not double yellows there, so there is opportunities for on-street parking elsewhere where it's safe to do so. But nevertheless, I think one of the objectors will refer to this van in their representations, and indeed, as you can see, when officers visited, it was present. So this is looking back towards where that van's parked. There's the protected tree. There's number 16 undergoing its transformation. And as you can see on the note to this slide, there's the access for the transformed dwelling, and then the new access for the 3 dwellings will sit in this gap here. You can see as you get towards the junction with High Seaton, you pick up the double yellows. Now this is actually now on the opposite side of the road. This is High Seaton. The junction with Fernley Drive is just off to the right of the camera. So we're looking back towards the site. This is the scaffolding for 16 High Seaton, and this is 17. So dwelling A would sit in this gap, and you can see the frontage edge. This image shows the visibility displays that are available at the junction of Fernley Drive and High Seaton. So that concludes the slide presentations, Chair. As I say, the principle of development in Seaton, it is for planning purposes, and I do reiterate planning purposes, part of the Workington Principal Centre, although obviously it's fully acknowledged that Seaton is its own parish and its own right, but under policy S3 of the local plan, it is seen as the principal centre, and therefore part of the 35% of overall growth over the plan period, and it's comfortably within the Part 2 settlement limits for Seaton, and therefore considered the principle acceptable. As you can see from the officer's report, I think a lot of the officers' deliberations were focused on the scale and layout of the development proposed and the appearance, given the relationship with surrounding dwellings. There are no items on the late list, Chair, and so that concludes the officer's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. I believe we've got speakers.
Thank you, Chair. The first speaker sent in some written representations. So that's from a Mr. Stockdale, and I'll hand you over to the planning officer to do these on his behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Chair. So Mr. Stockdale's asked for an image to be displayed while I read out his comments verbatim. So I'll just organise that image if I can. Can members all see that image, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Stockdale, actually this is from Mrs. Stockdale, but the letter is as follows. With reference to your correspondence dated 14th of September 2020, I do not wish to take part in the Zoom meeting, but would like my views to be read to this panel. I appreciate all that was in your letter affecting solely private interests, of which we have none. However, the development within 50 yards of a main road would, I suggest, have a detrimental effect on existing residents of Fernley Drive. I now see that the application has been changed from 3 dormer bungalows to 1 detached house and 2 dormer bungalows. I'm aware that the previous owners had an application some years ago for 1 additional property, which was rejected but then granted on appeal. That did not go ahead. The main house, which is being extended to a 6-bedroom property, is now twice as big as the original house, together with a huge 3-vehicle garage. A new access road entrance will feed the land on which the 3 new properties are to be built. As you can see from the attached photograph, a large burger van currently parks directly opposite this proposed new entrance. There is only one way in and out of Fernley Drive. The new development could mean multiple vehicles entering and exiting the new access road and the main road. During development, construction and delivery vehicles will make Fernley Drive even more congested. On refuse collection days, there could be an additional 9 bins on the narrow pavement. Overdevelopment in the area generally will only increase the pressure on local services, such as the schools. Yours faithfully, Mrs. Stockdale. That concludes that representation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Lee. Are you going to introduce the next speaker?
Yes, Chair, thank you. The next speaker is Joanne Mounsey. Joanne, if you can unmute yourself, you will have 5 minutes to deliver your presentation. Thank you.
Thanks for the opportunity for allowing me to speak here today. I'd like to start off by saying I live at number 17 High Seaton, so I'm impacted quite significantly by this development. With regards to residential amenity, I believe that would be significantly impacted in terms of privacy on myself and on other neighbours in the area, namely on Fernley Drive. I have primary windows on the south facing side of my property, which provide a lot of light into my living room and my kitchen. And property A, I believe, has a window that will overlook me. I also feel that property A now, especially that it's been made into a house rather than a dormer, will significantly overshadow my cottage. Is a 17th century cottage, so it's not particularly tall, it's quite squat. So I believe that dwelling will overshadow me. I've heard of mitigation measures around privacy with privacy glass and things like that, but the patio doors are open and window. People will be able to see directly from property A into my living room, both from the window that's on that side and also from their garden. I also believe that the noise for the area, if people outside, disturbance in the outside spaces, would also impact significantly on my privacy. I have a window at the rear of my property, which is the main bedroom, that will overlook into property B and part of property A. So I will be significantly be able to see what they're doing in their gardens, which I don't particularly want to do. I also believe, from the design perspective, that the design of especially property A, is not in keeping with the area. My house is a 1700s cottage. The former barn was also a very old building, as are the buildings to the north of me. So I believe that the design of property A is not in keeping with the area. We also have Fernley House, which is a listed building, which is on the other side of the Fernley Junction. So again, all of these dwellings, especially, the garage that has been built is significantly larger than I was expecting, and it has a very detrimental effect on the aesthetics of the area. I also believe that the number of properties is overcrowding the plot. I also have issues around the underground culvert that has run off from fields behind Fernley, that sits under where property A is being built. We currently have standing water. A boundary hedge was removed illegally by Mr. Dio. Against his architect's advice. He's broken the Party Wall Act in doing so, and he has also potentially undermined my lack of foundations. With it being an old property, part of it basically has no foundations. So he's excavated within 1 metre of my property without permission. So I'm concerned about the standing water, potential flooding, and potential impact on the integrity of my property. I also have issues around highway safety. The junction at Fernley is extremely busy, as is Hunters Drive. The volume of traffic is significant, especially with the new development up at High Seaton. I also believe that there's an environmental impact to this. I believe that area is a bit of a wildlife corridor, and I have seen lots of diversity of wildlife. I've seen red squirrels coming into my garden from that area. I've seen lots of other kinds of wildlife and birds. So I'm concerned about the loss of the biodiversity of the area. I also believe that other people who have not been given the opportunity to speak at this meeting. I consulted some neighbours on Fernley Drive number 4, namely, who had not received an opportunity to speak at this meeting, and would have raised concerns around traffic and traffic safety issues. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Mounsey. Do we have any questions for the speaker? Councillor Fairbrother.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Mounty, for your answer. I can't actually see you. I'll get you on here in a minute. For your presentation, which was extremely comprehensive. Just in the report, nothing's mentioned about this hedgerow being taken up, or anything about the underground culvert. Can you tell us a bit more?
I certainly
about that.
communicated that the fact that there is an underground culvert to the planning officer there. I believe it was also raised by another resident on Fernley who has, I think it's number 1 Fernley Close. I believe he raised that in a written communication. So I believe from what I can gather, the fields behind Fernley, the runoff water from the fields are diverted through this underground culvert, which you can plainly see the standing water on the site at the moment. Even in the dry periods at the early part of lockdown, there were, the water was still there. So the water isn't fully draining away as it is at the moment. So building on that site, I really believe I have concerns that it's going to undermine part of my foundations or lack of foundations. So the hedge was removed, as I said, illegally. I've consulted a solicitor on this. They were in breach of the Party Wall Act because they hadn't notified me that they were going to remove the hedge. What they actually did was remove part of my land as well, 0.75 strip of land, metres strip wide of my land that runs along the side of my property. And that actually makes the ground approximately 2 metres lower than my foundations, which I'm really concerned about. So I am pursuing legal advice on this because it's committed trespass. It's damaged a small retaining wall that I had that retained the soil that he removed. So I am pursuing that through legal measures.
Thank you. Thanks for your answer.
Thank you. We've now got Councillor Semple.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks very much, Joanne. I mean, I appreciate that, you really are impacted, and it's really important and good that you give us, how you're affected personally. My question is that you mentioned your house is an 18th century house. I feel like I kind of should know it really, but so is it like a detached property that you've got, or just tell me a little bit about the property you're in?
Yeah, so it's a detached, I believe it was 1700s. We had to do a desktop study to get an extension put on, and they sort of dated it around that area. So the original part, the front part of the property is original, so that the windows at the front are very small. So that's why the window at the side, the patio doors, are really important for natural light to get into the living room. So the rear of the property has been extended by previous owner and then by ourselves. But yeah, it is a very old house. I mean, I've got maps that go back to, when there was just High Seaton and Low Seaton, and the whole of Seaton didn't exist, but this part of the village did.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, Councillor Horsley, you've got a question.
Thank you very much, Chair. Joanne, good afternoon. Thanks for that
Hello.
speech. I'm your ward councillor, as you might know. Obviously, I know Seaton very well. And yeah, I agree with you what you're saying about the old part of Seaton and yours being on it. Personally, I like old properties myself. And yes, I could definitely agree with you. It is 1750s. What I have done before this meeting is I've had a site visit myself, viewing from a neighbour's property just round the corner on Fernley. And like you've mentioned there, I couldn't believe the standing water, which will just be adjacent to your house, to the side of your house. Now, it hasn't rained. We've had a very dry period over the last several weeks. So this culvert that you've mentioned there, it must be running water still. Can you, from your house, obviously you can see this water sitting?
Yes. Yes. Now, the drains on the main road, there's always running water in them because I believe they are part of the field drainage system as well. So I think these are being fed from the fields. I think that somebody mentioned it was 4 fields behind Fernley that feed this underground culvert. But yeah, and in the very sorry.
Yeah, no, you're right. Carry on.
And in the very dry period,
you're not.
I'm sorry.
Carry on, Joanne. Sorry. Carry on, please.
and in the very dry period at the beginning, March, April time, where we had very little rain at the beginning of lockdown, that was the only area that birds were coming to, because that was the only place that they could get water. All the other sources of fresh water had sort of dried up in the area.
Right, okay, okay. Could you tell us when the area's been dug out? I can remember at the time in the village, there was a bit of hell on about it, because when they were leading the soil away, it was all the way up the village going up High Seaton. But so for, like, you know, you've said there, for several months now, you can see water sitting in that area.
So it was approximately March, April time in 2019 that the original excavation was done, and as I say, it was done in breach of the Party Wall Act, and he also trespass has been and damage has been committed in them taking the boundary and part of my land away.
Wow. What I did see from a neighbouring property as well is the height difference from your house to the ground level now. Now, from me looking from, what, 50 metres away or whatever, it looks around 2 metres deep, lower than your property.
Yeah,
and there's a property, what you're saying is 1700s, which I'm not going to argue with you. I think it is. It looks as if your property is ready to drop into it. It doesn't look good.
That's my concern. Because they lowered the ground to be on a level with number 16 High Seaton, what they've done is they've actually dropped the level directly adjacent to me, approximately 2 metres lower than my non-existent foundations in the old part of the house.
Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Horsley. If you've got another question, put your hand up again, please. Councillor Fairbrother, did you have a second question, or did you forget to put your hand down? You're muted.
I forgot to put my hand down. Sorry, Chair.
No, that's okay. Councillor Kirkbride.
Good afternoon, Joanne. I'll second Daniel what he said there. Very well explained. My concerns there with the water, it wasn't like shallow water. It was like puddles of water, wasn't it? Am I right? I came up there and had a look around. There had been quite a bit of sunshine, no rain, but the puddles must have been there for some time. Is that right?
I believe they dug some holes, and those holes are quite deep. They have like a stake in one of them, obviously to gauge the height. I wouldn't be able to say exactly how deep it was, but it was certainly a lot more than what you would consider a puddle.
Puddle, right, yeah. Another concern is you're on about your foundations there. When I was up there having a look around, I noticed that they excavated very close to your fence line. Is that correct? Yeah.
So the wall that's existing there at the moment isn't my fence line. That was a retaining wall, because the height of the land was higher prior to it being excavated. We built a retaining wall to stop the soil slippage. There was actually a hedge that was actually the boundary, and that hedge and then the ground up to my wall have subsequently been removed. So part of that removal, they've actually taken part of my land and claimed it as part of that plot.
Right, yeah. And just another one there, then, looking at the plans, I mean, the plans there we've seen before look fairly spacious, but having looked at the site when I was up there, it doesn't give a good idea of when the house is there. To me, it's going to look cluttered. Would you agree with that? And your privacy will be affected from that first house.
I think there's a couple of issues on that. One, privacy, absolutely, definitely, in both my kitchen dining room and more importantly in my living room. Absolutely, 100%. In terms of the light to my living room, because it's now, especially now, it's a double-storey height building, those windows are south-facing windows and provide a lot of natural light into the house. So therefore, having that overshadowing of the other property in such close proximity, I believe it was 4 metres on the presentation. Well, 4 metres isn't really a lot, especially when you're in quite a small squat cottage.
Thank you. I think Councillor Kirkbride, if you've got another question, if you'd like to take your hand down and raise it again. Councillor Wilkinson, I wonder if you would just stick to one question and a supplementary, please. Thank you. It's your turn, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, there only is one question. Do you have any documentary evidence of this culvert? Going back to when it was put in? Is it hearsay? You know,
personally, I don't, but the gentleman at number 1 Fernley Close, he actually was party to some work being done on that culvert a number of years ago. I think before I moved into my property, which was approximately 15 years ago. So I believe that he has knowledge of what was done, because I believe the previous owner of number 16 actually had that work done.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. I don't see anybody else with their hands raised for a question. So just double checking. Thank you, Ms. Mounsey, for your participation.
I'm just trying to get my hand up. Yeah.
Oh,
I'm trying to get my hand up.
I've got Councillor Heaslip. He's put his hand up now. So, Councillor Heaslip, you're next.
Sorry, I was a bit late in getting me hand up there, Chair. I just one or two people have mentioned the issue of this culvert, and it troubles me that there's no mention of that in the county council highways. Well, it wouldn't be in a highways report, but there's no mention it in the aspect of the county council report that deals with flooding, and it's not shown on any map that we've been given. I mean, I don't know whether it's an appropriate question to ask Simon, the Development Control Manager, but are we sure that this culvert does not appear on any map anywhere? And if it does exist, how could it exist and the County Council as a flood authority not be aware of it as a watercourse? I don't know if that's a fair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway.
I think it's possibly one for Simon rather than the speaker. Shall we save that one for Simon, if that's all right, Councillor Heaslip?
Well, yes, I was actually, I was asking Simon that question. I don't know whether he can answer it because he can't, we'll speak for the County Council.
Yeah, we'll save that for when it's questions to the officer, if that's all right. At the moment, we're questions to the speaker. Thank you. Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm a bit perturbed that there's knowledge about this culvert, but no one has gone and delved deep enough into it. You're saying that there's been 2 meters of earth excavated on site, and there's now standing water, so I could come to a conclusion on things, but because there's no documentary evidence, I can't. But I would believe that this culvert's already been damaged, and that is why it's running onto your site. Were you there when the excavations was being concluded? And did you have any evidence with regards to this culvert?
Personally, because they did a lot of it while I was out, interestingly enough, I spoke to, I think it's number 1, Fernley, the lady in there, and she said that while they were doing it, she'd heard them say, oh, we'll have to stop digging now. They'd hit something, but she didn't know exactly what it was that they'd hit.
I think that's sort of hearsay. I think we'll move on because it's more for Simon Sharp, that question, really. I've got no more hands raised. So, Lee, if we can, thank you, Ms. Mounsey. Lee, do we have Councillor Sanath with us?
Yeah, if you just bear with me a second, I'll fetch Councillor Sanath into the meeting.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Councillor Sanif. Can you hear me?
Yes, certainly.
Thank you. It's just Lee here. Just on behalf of the chair, it's your turn to speak.
Yes.
So you'll have 5 minutes to address the panel if you want to make your representations.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chair. Hello, Councillor Sanders speaking. I'm one of the Allerdale Borough Councillors for the Seaton ward. I am speaking today because of the large number of villagers that either phoned, emailed, or simply told me of their concerns when making my way about the village. I feel these concerns are truly valid to our village life. The main complaint to myself is the overdevelopment of the already busy corner and the access and egress issues. The original dwelling now has 6 ensuite bedrooms. This in itself could result in an extra 10 cars. Then the proposed 3 extra dwellings adjoining this development could take the total number of vehicles to 16. And that would be from an original dwelling of 2. This is going to change from one detached dwelling to a small community. One of the main concerns from the residents of Seaton is the access and egress to Fernley Drive, so close to the busy junction adjoining the busy main road through Seaton, and the overdevelopment of the corner of this busy housing estate. Taking all things into consideration, the villagers are just so under pressure with all the new developments that's going on. It's absolutely ridiculous for the village. So basically, could I ask the development panel if they would consider having a site visit to see the problems firsthand for themselves? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sanath. I'm now going to ask if the members have got any questions for you. So if you could stay on the line, please.
Yes, certainly.
Councillor Horsley.
Afternoon, Joe.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, I share your concerns because I'm a ward councillor as well, as you know, for Seaton. On Sunday, I took it on myself to have a look at the site. Lovely summer's day, or late summer, should I say. For the first thing that really alarmed me was Fernley Drive and the line of cars going up the right-hand side of it. Obviously, the left-hand side if you're coming down facing towards the road. It's a while since I've been up that way, to be honest. I normally walk down the lower part of Seaton with my dogs and that. But the full side of that road was parked cars.
Yeah.
And you see in there, that house, what was Barncroft, what is named Barncroft, which was one dwelling originally, it's now been turned into 6 bedrooms, 6 bathrooms it's got. So I'm not sure what use this is gone. So I do share your concern there with all these cars from that one property. But to add another junction further up from it, what you're saying as well, which I did look at myself.
Councillor Horsley, do you actually have a question? We're not in debate at the moment.
Yeah, I'm just looking up that road. Have you been up this morning to Councillor Sanath for the last couple of days?
Yes, certainly. Yeah. I do believe that area is just in total saturation point, and this is simply going to add to it, and the problems that could result in accidents and everything, and also just the where people could park, because it's going to make less parking with the access and egress. So it's going to make a bad position absolutely 10 times worse. It's going to be really lots of problems.
Yeah, thank you. You've answered my question there. Thank you,
Okay,
Joe.
cheers.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sanath. Do we have any more questions for Councillor Sanath? No, can't see any hands. Thank you, Councillor Sanath.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you very much.
Bye. Right, Lee, is that all the speakers now?
No, Chair, we have one more written representation. So this is the applicant or the agent, Simon Blacker, on behalf of DO Properties, and I'll hand you over to the planning officer to read the letter out on his behalf. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Thank you, Chair. So I'm reading this verbatim. These are the comments from the applicant. Chair and member of the planning panel, we would like to take this opportunity to comment on the issues raised by the objectors in relation to this planning application. We understand that people have concerns when new development is proposed on land adjacent to existing housing. However, we have worked with the planning officer over a number of months to address the neighbour concerns, resulting in the amended scheme you now have before you, recommended for approval. Firstly, the site is within the settlement limit for Seaton, and as such is the location that forms part of the Workington Principal Centre, and therefore the proposed development is compliant with policies S1, S2 and S3 of the Allerdale Local Plan. With regards from the site access from the highway, members will note that the County Council, in their capacity of Highways Authority, raised no objection, and the proposal therefore considered compliant with policy S22 of the local plan. As mentioned above, dwellings B and C have been significantly amended during the application process in terms of scale, massing and positioning within the site. The officer is now satisfied that the properties are acceptable in terms of residential amenity to surrounding properties, and as such are in accordance with policy S32 of the local plan. It is noted that the officer is recommending a condition that removes certain permitted development rights to retain an appropriate level of residential amenity, which we accept. The report also notes that the density and plot ratio is appropriate for this location, taking the adjacent housing on Fernley Drive into account. With regards to the only other point raised in the objectors' representations, any disruption during the site development, if the application is approved, will be kept to a minimum with awareness and regard for the adjacent properties in relation to working hours, timing of deliveries, etc. We therefore hope that the application will be approved in accordance with the officer's recommendation. Kind regards, Jaspreet Deo Properties. That concludes that representation, Chair.
Thank you. And as obviously you can't answer questions on his behalf, we'll move on to questions from members to the planning officer. So I believe, Councillor Heaslip, you were first, weren't you?
Yes, sorry, Chair. I was I spoke out of turn earlier. The question I was going to ask to Simon as the planning officer was, and he may not be able to answer it, but how come a number of people with local knowledge of the area referring to a culvert going across the site, but yet the county council's as flood authority has not mentioned it, and it's not appeared on any maps that we've been seeing. I'm just curious as to understand how that can be.
Thank you, Councillor Heaslip. So the answer to that question is in two parts, really. The first part is that the County Council as the lead local flood authority, will not have records of private watercourses, whether they are open or culverted. So if you can remember from the discussions, and forgive me, Councillor Heaslip, I don't think you were party to them, but for the application, the large application at the other end of Seaton, there are main rivers which come under the control of the Environment Agency's responsibility, and that includes some of the watercourses flowing into them. Obviously, United Utilities have responsibility for public sewers, including surface water sewers. So where there is actually a private watercourse, typically a riparian watercourse that's either owned by one landowner or the landowners either side of that watercourse, the county council won't have records of that watercourse. So they rely on the details submitted by the applicant and site inspections if they have taken place. Now, I've noted from the applicant's flood risk and drainage statement that submitted with the application that there was a statement that there are no watercourses on site. Now, I cannot tell you as the officer today whether the county council as lead local flood authority in making their recommendation of no objections to the scheme subject to conditions took into account the existence of a private watercourse culverted across the site or not. What they did conclude, which is what the applicant concluded, and they corroborated, was that there are impermeable soils on the site, and that soakaway's infiltration was not possible for the drainage across the site. Miss Mounsey, the lady next door, referred to pits being dug. They were part of the infiltration tests in accordance with BRE 365 digest to undertake whether there was permeability on the site, and there wasn't for this development. Obviously, when you are putting impermeable surfaces on a site, such as buildings, driveways, etc., you're increasing the impermeability, and you need to take that into account. So the Highways Authority, the lead local flood authority, would have looked at the calculations in depth, but I do note that firstly, they wouldn't have records of private watercourses, and secondly, that there was a declaration on the applicant's submissions that there was no private watercourse across the site.
Chair, can I just say I'm something of a dilemma now, because we have the applicant's declaration there was no private watercourse on site, and yet we have evidence from local people, and no reason to doubt them, that there is in fact a private watercourse on site. So not wishing to prejudice anything, I'm in some difficulty now, Chair, because I'm not certain that we actually have all the facts that we need to have.
Perhaps we'll save that for when we get to debate and moving on to motions. Thank you, Councillor Heaslip. Councillor Fairbrother.
Thank you, Chair. This question possibly relates to what we were talking about before. Simon, on page 33 of the report, 1118, 1119, I don't really understand what it's trying to say. Is it that they're going to have a rainwater harvesting scheme and that County Council have approved it? And if so, what is that scheme? I'm sorry, I don't quite understand those two paragraphs there. Can you explain for me?
Thank you, Councillor Fairbrother. So there is a surface water hierarchy. In other words, the priorities of how surface water will be dealt with within a development. So that's set out nationally. Policy S29 of our local plan part 1 reflects that national hierarchy. At the top of that hierarchy is either water reuse, and I'll come on to that in a second, or percolation, infiltration, i.e. typically via a soakaway on site. The second preference is for discharge into a watercourse, if available. That probably comes into play in relevance with Councillor Heaslip's question. And then if that's not possible, water discharging into a sewer. So infiltration was shown to be not possible for all the site. So they are proposing rainwater harvesting, which basically involves capturing water, rainwater from the site. So instead of it draining off roofs, down along gutters, down pipes, and into the sewers or into a watercourse, that rainwater, and it's just basically like a grander scheme of your rainwater butts that a lot of us use for watering the garden. But in this case, that rainwater can be captured in larger tanks and actually fed back into the house for certain functions in the house. So it can't be used for potable water, for water that you drink, but it can be used for systems such as flushing toilets, for example, that sort of thing. So that's rainwater harvesting. It's different to grey water harvesting, which is not being proposed here, when water from things like washing machines is recycled into the house. So that's what the rainwater harvesting is. But as you can see from the officer's report, they're not proposing by any means 100% rainwater harvesting. And as you see, there will be still excess surface water not captured by the rainwater system. That's the residual surface water runoff referred to in paragraph 11.18, and that will go into the sewer system as detailed in the plans. And as I say, that is what the county council are content with, and therefore officers were content with as well. Obviously, the existence of a watercourse brings into play something between rainwater harvesting and a sewer discharge in that hierarchy. So there is relevance to that, if that answers your question.
Yes, that answers my question. I hadn't understood that from the report. Thank you very much, Simon.
Can I just clarify that we seem to have lost a member? So may I suggest that we have a 10-minute adjournment while we try and get him back? Sorry about this, folks, but we'll just have a 10-minute adjournment. So if you could come back at 14:40 while we try and get Dan Horsley back. Thank you. And if you could switch off your videos while you go and make a cuppa, that would be great. Cheers. I can see we've got Dan's room back.
Yeah, Chair, I can confirm that Councillor Horsley is back on the meeting, so we're just waiting for everyone to come back before we resume.
That's brilliant. Thank you.
Afternoon, Nikki. I'm back. Back.
That's great. We just
completely lost signal then.
No, it's fine. We've just had a quick break, so I think everybody was ready for one anyway.
Yeah, members, if you can switch your cameras on, and we'll start as soon as everyone's returned. Thank you. Just waiting to one more member, Chair. Okay, to resume, Chair.
Good of you to join us, Councillor Heaslip. My next person with a question for the planning officer is Councillor Daniels.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, Simon, I don't know whether you want to comment on the hedge being removed without permission and the alleged trespassing on Joanne's property. But my question really is, Mr. Stockdale brought up the question of rubbish collecting. Now, I would presume this is a new build, that the rubbish lorries would actually be going on to into where the houses have been built there. Their rubbish bins won't be coming out onto the street. Am I correct in that assumption?
Thank you, Councillor Daniels. No, it's a private drive, so it's a shared private drive. So the refuse vehicles would not be going onto that drive. Those were in expectation that bins would be taken to the carriageway edge.
So they already have a, sorry, Madam Chair, if I can continue. So they already have a problem, according to Mr. Stockdale, with the amount of lorries and the burger van and whatever else is parked there. So this is just going to increase that problem, I assume, because you got quite a lot of more rubbish bins out, and the lorry going to be there for quite a much longer time, isn't it? So yeah, I can see where that's not going to be very helpful. But yeah, we are where we are. Thank you, Simon.
My next question is from Councillor Semple.
Thank you, Chair. Simon, I mean, Joanne touched on I'm going to look at paragraph 11.7 of the report. I understand now she's in an 18th century house, and I have to say this language is worthy of Defoe or Swift. Let me just read this bit to you. It is disappointing that the proposed dwelling is orientated away from High Seaton, and this will give rise to the rather odd juxtaposition of front and back gardens with the potential for rather incongruous incidental buildings and other domestic paraphernalia, and high fences to be built within the new back garden space. Nevertheless, natural landscaping will ensure that the landscape harm is low. So I can't decide whether that paragraph is saying, well, it's not perfect, but it'll do. Just explain that a bit more to me, please.
Thank you, Councillor Semple. So I think, as with many developments that become before panel, we always, as officers, before a development comes to panel, try to seek added value, so enhancements to a development. There are occasions when we get to a stage where we bring a development forward before panel with a balanced recommendation for approval, but we recognise as officers that there would be still scope for improvement, but on balance, the development is acceptable. And this is what we're saying in this instance. It would have been preferable that the dwelling between numbers 16 and 17 faced High Seaton and fronted High Seaton. I would guess that the applicant has not done that because of the depth of garden available between the dwellings on High Seaton and the High Seaton, the road itself, and the fact that there's the hedge along the High Seaton frontage, and therefore is trying to maximise that space. But because other dwellings along High Seaton are orientated the other way round, you do get a rather odd juxtaposition of back and front gardens. It's not ideal, but it is acceptable on balance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Next, we've got Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. Simon, I'm really worried. This culvert, I don't believe that the flood risk report has had everything and all knowledge at its disposal. So I believe this could be now flawed. And I'm actually in Councillor Hislop's camp here with this. I really don't believe we have enough information here for this application to make a judgment on it, to be honest with you. And I think more knowledge needs to be gained from this. You've said yourself that the Cumbria County Council don't have knowledge of private waterways. Is this a normal thing that happens, that the lead on flood doesn't know private waterways?
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. So there are, as you all know, many field drains, culverts, etc. across Allerdale. And, you know, a lot of them divide private land. There are actually those ones in gardens. Some have been culverted over the years. Technically, culverting a private watercourse requires consent under the Land Drainage Acts. We all know that there are huge numbers that never got those consents. So the County Council, as lead local flood authority, they won't have those records of where those culverts are. What they do is look at detail at submissions and undertake site visits. I don't know whether they took a site visit in this particular case. I haven't got that information in front of me. So what I can say in answer to your question, Councillor Wilkinson, is obviously there is a drainage solution here that's been approved by the County Council, which doesn't rely on a watercourse. If that watercourse is here, no position, and not at all saying that there isn't the one, because you know that's the local information. So the information submitted, which the County Council have agreed to, and therefore we as officers have recommended agreement to, includes something at the top of the surface water drainage hierarchy, rainwater harvesting, and something at the bottom of the hierarchy. Now the watercourse sits in the middle of that hierarchy, so it is preferable to drainage to the sewer. So although officers would retain their recommendation to you that we've got an acceptable surface water drainage scheme before you, it would be reasonable as a member to also, in the knowledge that there is a watercourse there on site, to question whether the drainage system could include discharge to a watercourse and take into account the discharges into that watercourse. That would be a reasonable stance if members saw fit to go. As I say, the officer recommendation remains the same, that there is a workable and acceptable drainage system proposed, corroborated by the lead local flood authority. But it is an understandable and reasonable position for members to come to a different view in the knowledge of the existence of a private watercourse.
Did you have a supplementary, or was it a separate question?
No, it's a supplementary, Chair. The legal side of things on this. See, I'm at a loss now as whether, because this meeting is now today and this evidence, we don't have any concrete evidence of this watercourse. What are our legal standings on this? Because I'm torn between proposing a deferment on this. Obviously, we don't have the concrete evidence, so I can't go down a rejection route. But what are our legal position on getting a deferment on this to look deeper into this watercourse? Do we have a legal stance on this today, that because the information has not been supplied to this meeting today, will we have a legal backlash on this?
Thank you, Councillor Wilkins. So the position is, you've got a statement by the applicant that there are no watercourses on the site. You've had information today put to you by a third party that there is a culverted watercourse on the site. Now, it's only reasonable that to say that there is, you are conflicted and unsure about facts because you have two different statements being made. And although, as I say, the officer's recommendation remains the same, and I'm not, as your officer, suggesting any particular way forward, it wouldn't be unreasonable. In other words, it would be reasonable for members to come to the view that, given that Policy S29 has a surface water hierarchy that includes a watercourse higher than a sewer, that clarification could be required, a deferral could be there for clarification to be sought on the existence or otherwise of a watercourse on the site and its ability to take water from the development. That, if members see fit, would be a reasonable stance on planning grounds to seek a deferral. Not suggesting that as officers, but that would, in my opinion, be a reasonable stance.
I'm just wondering whether or not everybody feels the same way here, that we all seem to be quite worried about the discrepancy, which has been sort of with the statements between the applicant and the neighbours. So I think I'm just wondering if people would mind if I put forward a motion that we have a deferral for this application, so that the discrepancies can be looked into by the lead flood authority for the reasons that Simon actually gave, and have a site visit. So I wondered if somebody might like to second that.
I would like to second that, Chair.
Okay.
Just for clarification, so I think, Chair, you're putting forward a motion that you would wish to see clarification on the existing surface water drainage systems on site, because that has implications as to whether those existing surface water systems could be used as part of a surface water drainage system instead of reliance on sewers.
Yes, but for the reasons that you mentioned, and Policy S29, etc., that you explained in great detail before, but I don't think I can actually repeat it, but I thoroughly agreed with it, plus members having a site visit as well.
Understood, Chair.
Okay. We do have other people wanting questions. I'm sorry I jumped in there, but I just think we were all feeling, some of us were feeling the same way. Councillor Fairbrother.
Thank you, Chair. This is a different topic. When Joanne Mancy was giving her presentation, she did actually mention a listed building at Fernley House. Does that have any significance to this development? I don't know how far away it is. I was just curious to know whether that listed building would be affected by this development.
Thank you, Councillor Fairbrother. As officers, we consider, because there's intervening other development between listed building and the development of these dwellings, we don't consider that there is any impact on the setting of that listed building.
Just for clarification, how far away is it, Simon? Is it just a few streets away or the same street?
I'd have to actually measure it on a on a plan, which I can do. That's fine, but it is separated by the development. Is probably the best way to describe it. It's actually not on the site plan. It's actually beyond the limits there.
Thank you.
Councillor.
No need to measure.
Oh, sorry. Councillor Horsley.
Thank you, Chair. I could answer Councillor Fairbrother's question there. It's about 20 metres from the site is Fernley House. That's not my question. Yeah, I'm pleased that everyone's acknowledging about this culvert, because I've clearly seen no water on the site, so that's great. But another concern of mine is the way the site has been dug out in that corner, and as Joanne Mounsey said, it's in danger of undermining a house. Now, this, as Simon has indicated, there's a 4-metre gap between these two houses. Now, if they're going to dig down again on site, I am really concerned about this 17th century property. And it's not built on foundations. It's now standing 2 metres higher, at least 2 metres higher than the site. I really am concerned about this this property adjacent to 17 High Seaton. I'm just and obviously the taking of the land as well, the boundary. It really is niggling at us.
Thank you, Councillor Halsey. Obviously, it matters with regard to Party Wall Act and excavations within the juxtaposition of or within close proximity to a boundary that is dealt with under the Party Wall Act. What members can consider is obviously the visual impact, the character impact, and the residential amenity impact of the development within close proximity of a neighbouring dwelling. But actually, the impact on that property's foundations in terms of the excavations, I would leave to the Party Wall Act. Obviously, as it showed some slides before, which do show that there is that previous to the excavations, and I'll just share this slide again if I can. Oops. Members can see on this slide that this is Ms. Mounsey's property number 17. So you can see, it is a historic property. You can see this is obviously pre-excavations, how number 16 sits on lower land. You can see how the land fell away from that site. You can see where the boundary was. You can see there was also sort of orchard trees that lay in that space. This was the view this morning. It's a bit difficult to see, but you can see that relationship. You can see there's number 17 there. So you can see there are windows that face out onto the space which number dwelling A would occupy. We just go. So you can see from this site plan that 17 is set slightly forward, but there is this area here where the two properties would be adjacent to each other with that 4 metre gap. Thank you, councillors.
Councillor Heaslip, it's your turn. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Chair. The angle on the culvert, that I accept the point that Simon's made about the sustainable drainage system, but I have another angle on the culvert. I'm asking for guidance really from Simon on whether the fact that there is, irrespective whether we use it for drainage or not, whether the fact that there is actually a culverted watercourse running through the site and potentially under the under building A that's been proposed is a material consideration for us or not.
Thank you, Councillor Heaslip. Yeah, it is a relevant consideration. Because obviously the water dynamics on site could be altered by the building. It's a valid point.
Do you have a supplementary, Councillor Heaslip? Did you have a supplementary, or are you fine?
I was going to have a supplementary, but Simon answered it before I asked it.
Right. Okay, Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you, Chair. Simon, looking at the drawings and the bound lines and what have you, as we've heard from one of the objectors who lives at number 17, that is court case is coming. But are these boundaries that's on the drawings from the old disputed boundary, or are they from what's there to be seen now? That's something I want to try and get my head round. Is it because obviously the hedge has been taken out and we still have the photographs of the hedge? So where, how old are the plans? Do they cover the old boundaries that's now been removed and changed?
Thank you, Councillor Wilkinson. It's a surveyed boundary. So it's a surveyed boundary which would have been based on actual surveys on site and then land registry extracts. Obviously, we're fully aware, as you know, you will be aware, members, that on older properties, boundaries, that there are regularly discussions because of the accuracy of old plans about exactly where, for example, in a hedge a boundary falls, and that it's a minefield. The only what we can go on is what's been declared with no information before us to say that's inaccurate. Obviously, the dimension that I put in on, which I think is of particular relevance here, was the separation distance between the proposed and existing dwellings, the 4 metres. I think that was, a critical distance.
Thank you. Next, we've got Councillor Semple.
Thanks, Chair. Actually, I was agreeing with your proposal, which you made some minutes ago. I mean, any further questions that's going to arise from the debate will be answered by what you proposed. And I don't know whether it was seconded, but I certainly second it, because I feel now that I can't make any decisions or take back. I want to go on that site visit.
Thank you, Councillor Semple. I think we've sort of moved into debate as well. Does anybody want to debate anymore, or did you want to go to the vote, or what? Looks like I'll give you another few seconds. Councillor Wilkinson.
Yeah, Chair, I would like us to just go to a vote. You put a proposal on the table. I seconded it. that I was in agreement with you. I think the flood risk assessment is flawed because all the information is not there. The lead flood risk authority does not know about this alleged culvert. So
yeah, I think we covered that. Yeah.
the best way forward for this, rather than us open a big can of worms, is for to defer it, a site visit, and give opportunities for at least documentary evidence of some sort for to come forward. And I think without this, the evidence of this culvert, we could be digging a big hole for ourselves.
Thank you, Councillor Fairbrother.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm quite prepared to go to the vote, but I don't think a site visit is actually practical, is it, in the current circumstances? We'd have to go individually, surely. We can't go in a minibus together. I certainly would like to defer it because of the ambiguity of the information about the culvert, but I can't really see that a site visit is practical.
I think Simon's might have a way.
Can I just jump in there? Sorry, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Fairbrother. Obviously, things are changing, and I, during the 15-minute lunch break after our training this morning, noted that the news channels are running on what's changing in terms of lockdown procedures, so I can't preempt those. The advice as it stands is a site visit could be possible. I know other authorities have done site visits with members finding their own way to the site and then obviously maintaining social distancing, etc. on site. Obviously, after the Prime Minister's announcements this evening, that might change. But my officer's opinion to you at the moment is that site visits would be possible if members are prepared to get their own way to the site and then obviously maintain the social distancing, etc. Then when you've arrived at site.
Thank you for that clarification. I wouldn't want to vote for something which just wasn't going to happen. So thank you, Simon.
Thank you. I think that's everybody now. So Lee, could we go to the vote, please?
Thank you, Chair. Members, just voting on the motion that's been seconded. If you can just say your full name and then whether you vote for, against, or abstain. Councillor Coburn.
Councillor Coburn, vote for.
Councillor Daniels.
Councillor Daniels, for.
Councillor Fairbrother.
Councillor Fairbrother, for.
Councillor Heaslip.
Councillor Michael Heaslip, for.
Councillor Horsley.
Councillor Daniel Horsley, for.
Councillor Kirkbride.
Councillor Kirkbride, for.
Councillor Semple.
Councillor Semple, for.
Councillor Smith.
Councillor Smith, for.
Councillor Tyson.
Councillor Tyson, for.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Councillor Wilkinson, for.
Thank you, Chair. Unanimous, all in favour of the motion. The motion is carried.
Thank you. I think can somebody tell me the date of the next meeting? Because obviously this one is being deferred until for the reasons given before. Does anybody know the date of the next meeting so we can all get together again?
I believe it's the 20th of October, Lee.
Yeah, and just on that, Chair, we'll be in contact with all members in relation to any site visits.
Yeah, and hopefully we should have the information from the lead flood authority about the discrepancies as well. So thank you for that. Thank you for your time, everybody.
Chair, if you can just clarify the decision that was made, please.
Right.
Cheers.
The motion was carried that there will be a deferral for a site visit and for the lead flood authority to have a inspection or clarification of the discrepancies that were discussed today. I think, Simon, you could perhaps clarify that a little bit better than what I'm bumbling through.
Yes, Chair. There was obviously a discrepancy between the information submitted by the applicant and then the presentation from a third party, and there's clarification required as to whether there is a culverted watercourse on site, because that has obviously implications for surface water drainage on the site and surface water drainage solutions.
Thank you.
Thank you. So the application FUL 2020-0043 has been deferred. Is that clear enough, Lee?
Thanks very much, Chair.
Thank you. And thank you, everybody, for your time.